The man who controlled the most dangerous nation in the Middle East was killed. No successor was named. No plan was in place, and 80 million people woke up the next morning not knowing who was in charge of their country. The world's most powerful governments went into emergency mode overnight. And somewhere in a bunker right now, a group of men are fighting over who gets to control Iran's nuclear weapons. Let me take you back. Because to understand what happens after Khamenei, you need to understand what made Khamenei, Iran, a country of 80 million people, one of the oldest civilizations on Earth, Persian Empire, Silk Road, thousands of years of history, and for the last 35 years, all of it was controlled by one man. Hosseini Khamenei became supreme leader in 1980, not because he was the most powerful cleric, not because he was the most popular, but because he was available and he was controllable. Or so they thought. See, when Ayatollah Khamenei, the founder of the Islamic Republic, died in 1989, Iran had a problem. Khamenei was a Marja, a grand Ayatollah, a man of immense religious authority. Khamenei was not that. He was a mid-level cleric, a political operator, a second-tier figure. The men who chose him thought he'd be a puppet. They were wrong. Over 35 years, Khamenei built a system, a web of loyalty, fear, intelligence, and ideology. He controlled the military. He controlled the judiciary. He controlled who could run for president. He controlled Iran's nuclear program. He didn't just lead Iran. He was Iran. Now, he's gone. So here is the question that every intelligence agency in Washington, Tel Aviv, Riyadh, and Moscow is trying to answer right now. Who picks up the pieces? Before I tell you who's fighting for power right now, you need to understand how this system actually works. Iran is not a dictatorship in the traditional sense. It's not North Korea. There's no single-family dynasty. It's something far more complicated and far more dangerous. Iran has two parallel governments running at the same time. The first, one you've heard of. There's a president, there's a parliament, there are elections, people vote, candidates campaign. But here's what they don't tell you. Above all of that sits the supreme leader. He is not elected by the people. He cannot be removed by the people. He controls the armed forces directly. He controls foreign policy. He controls the nuclear program. He has final say on every major decision in the country. In Iran's constitution, the supreme leader is described as the Wali-e-Faqih, the guardian jurist. The idea, rooted in Shia Islam, is that in the absence of the hidden imam, a messianic figure, a senior Islamic scholar must govern society. This isn't just politics. This is theology. And that's what makes the succession so uniquely complicated, because the supreme leader is chosen by a body called the Assembly of Experts, 88 Islamic scholars, all men elected by the public. But here's the catch. Candidates for the assembly are vetted by the Guardian Council, and the Guardian Council is appointed by the supreme leader. You see how this works? It's a system designed to preserve itself, designed to prevent outsiders from breaking in, designed by Khamenei for Khamenei. But Khamenei never finished his most important job. He never publicly named a successor, and that is the crisis. Right now, 3 major power centers inside Iran are moving pieces on a chessboard. Let me introduce you to each one. The first name you need to know, and the one most analysts are watching closest, is Mojtaba Khamenei, the supreme leader's own son. Now, in an Islamic republic, hereditary succession is officially forbidden. The whole ideology of the revolution was built against monarchy, against the Shah, against dynasties. But here's where things took a dark turn. Mojtaba Khamenei has spent the last decade quietly building loyalty inside the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Iran's most powerful military force, the organization that controls the missiles, the proxies in Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, the money. He is not a grand religious scholar. He doesn't have the theological credentials, officially, but the IRGC doesn't care about theology. They care about loyalty, and Mojtaba has given them that. If the IRGC backs him, the Assembly of Experts may have no choice. Here's the second scenario, and this one is the most dangerous for the world. What if no one person takes power? What if the IRGC, already the most powerful institution in Iran, simply becomes the government? The IRGC is not just a military force. Over the last 30 years, it has become an economic empire. It controls construction companies, telecommunications, shipping ports, oil contracts. Estimates suggest it controls 30 to 40% of Iran's entire economy. It has its own intelligence service, its own foreign policy arm, its own media networks. The IRGC has always needed a supreme leader as a shield, a religious face to legitimize their power to the Iranian public. What happens when that shield is gone? Do they still need one, or do they just take over? This is the scenario that keeps American generals awake at night, because a military junta controlling Iran's nuclear program, with no diplomatic process, no theological restraint, no political face to negotiate with, is a fundamentally different threat than anything the world has dealt with before. And then there's the third force, the one that the Iranian people are desperately hoping for. Inside Iran, there has always been a reform movement. Young people, educated middle class, women who risked their lives in 22-2 to protest the hijab laws. Millions of Iranians who want a different country. They have leaders too. Former presidents. Reformist clerics who believe Iran can modernize while remaining Islamic. But here's the brutal reality. These people have been systematically jailed, silenced, and removed from power for 35 years. The Guardian Council has blocked reformist candidates from running for office over and over again. And right now, with missiles in the air and an Israeli-American military operation actively striking Iranian soil, the reformists have no army, no Revolutionary Guard backing, no institutional power. In a moment of national crisis, people don't rally around moderates. They rally around whoever promises strength. Now I need to talk about the nuclear question, because everything else, the politics, the succession, the power struggle, it's all secondary. The real question, the one that every government in the world is focused on right now. What happens to the nuclear program? Iran has been enriching uranium to approximately 60% purity. Weapons grade requires 90%. They are close. Closer than they have ever been. For Khamenei, there was always a theological restraint. He had issued what he called a fatwa, a religious ruling, against nuclear weapons. Whether he actually meant it is debatable. But it gave diplomats something to work with, a face-saving position for Iran to step back from the ledge. Mojtaba Khamenei has issued no such fatwa. The IRGC generals have issued no such fatwa. And here is what most people get wrong about this moment. The Israeli strikes and the American military operation. They were meant to stop Iran's nuclear program. But there is a real possibility, being debated in Washington right now, that the power vacuum created by Khamenei's death makes Iran more likely to race toward a bomb, not less. The logic inside Tehran's new power circles may be exactly this. We just watched our supreme leader get assassinated by Israeli airstrikes. We just watched the Americans do nothing to stop it. The only thing that protects a country from this kind of aggression is a nuclear deterrent. That's the logic North Korea used. That's the logic Pakistan used. And right now, whoever controls Iran's enrichment facilities is making a calculation. And we don't know what they're deciding. Let me take you around the world right now. Because Iran's power vacuum doesn't stay inside Iran. Washington launched these strikes. But winning a military operation and winning the aftermath are two completely different things. The U.S. has a long, painful history of removing leaders and then watching chaos fill the void. Iraq, 2003. Libya, 2011. The administration is now under enormous pressure to answer one question. What's the plan? Saudi Arabia has been trying to normalize relations with Iran over the past 2 years. That deal is now effectively dead. A chaotic, leaderless Iran is unpredictable in ways that even a hostile Iran was not. China has invested billions in Iran. Oil contracts, infrastructure. China has been Iran's economic lifeline through sanctions. And China has zero interest in a U.S.-friendly government taking over in Tehran. Beijing is already signaling, through diplomatic back channels, that any attempt to install a pro-Western government in Iran will be treated as a direct threat to Chinese interests. Russia and Iran have become de facto military allies. Iranian drones on Ukrainian battlefields. Russian technology flowing into Iran in return. Putin is watching this with cold, strategic eyes. A weakened Iran is a weakened ally. But a chaotic Iran, where Russian weapons might fall into unknown hands, is a problem too. Every major power on earth is now trying to shape what Iran looks like in 6 months, and none of them agree. That competition between Washington, Beijing, Moscow, Riyadh, Tel Aviv is the second war happening right now. Not with missiles, with money, intelligence, and influence. Now I want to talk about something most Western channels will completely ignore. What does this mean for India? India has always walked a careful line with Iran. India needs Iranian oil. India has invested in Chabahar port, a strategic gateway to Afghanistan and Central Asia, bypassing Pakistan. India has maintained diplomatic relations with Tehran even when the entire Western world was imposing sanctions. That careful balance just got much more complicated. Oil prices. Iran's disruption, combined with the ongoing Strait of Hormuz crisis, is already pushing crude prices toward dangerous territory. India imports roughly 85% of its crude oil. Every $10 rise in the oil price costs India approximately $15 billion in additional import bills per year. Chabahar Port, India's single most important strategic infrastructure project in the region, now sitting in a country in the middle of a war and a political crisis. The future of that port depends entirely on who ends up in power in Tehran. Not side openly with the US-Israel operation, but India also cannot openly condemn it. India will say as little as possible, move quietly, and wait to see who wins. That's not weakness. That's strategy. Here is what history teaches us about moments like this. 1. The hardest part of a war is not the war itself. It's the day after. Every empire that has ever tried to reshape the Middle East, from the British carving borders in 1916 to the Americans in Baghdad in 2003, has made the same mistake. They were brilliant at removing the old order, and completely unprepared for what came next. Iran right now is not a country that will quietly accept a new government handed to it from Washington or Tel Aviv. It has 2,500 years of civilization, a deep, complicated national identity that exists beneath and beyond the Islamic Republic. The Iranian people are not their government. But the Iranian people, right now, are surrounded by foreign missiles watching their capital burn and being told by every outside power what their future should look like. History tells us what happens next in that situation. They don't accept it. They resist. And whoever steps into Khamenei's shoes, whether it's his son, a general, a council of clerics, or someone we haven't even heard of yet, they will use that resistance as fuel. The power vacuum is not empty. It is filling, and the world is not ready for what fills it. This channel exists for one reason, not to give you breaking news. You can get that anywhere. This channel exists to give you context, to connect the dots between a headline today and a history that goes back decades, sometimes centuries. Because when you understand why things happen, not just that they happened, you stop being surprised by the world. You start being prepared for it. Want to understand the next crisis before it hits? Subscribe to Finance Historian, because that is exactly what we cover here. And if this video made you think differently about Iran, even slightly, share it with one person who needs to understand what's really happening right now. Not for the algorithm, for the conversation.